You will hear some conversations between two people. You will be asked to answer 3 questions about what the speakers say in each conversation. Select the best response to each question and mark the letter A, B, C, or D on your answer sheet. The conversations will not be printed in your test book and will be spoken only one time.
Now, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3.
Listen to part of a conversation between a student and a professor. It's great to see you. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
How can I help you?
Well, in our last lecture, you mentioned that the final exam would be a cumulative test and that it would cover the entire textbook and at least one other history book. I think the textbook is too big. It has over 800 pages, so I'm thinking of withdrawing from your history course.
Oh, that's a shame.
I really don't want to drop the course, so I thought I'd consult you in case you had any helpful advice.
Well, first of all, it's unusual for students to withdraw this late in the semester. We've already completed 5 weeks of the course.
Yes, I know, but the deadline for withdrawal isn't until next week. I enjoy your class and I love history, but there's too much information to study. Also, I have a part-time job here on campus, so I don't have much time to study.
Well, let me take a quick look at your record. I see. It looks good. You're doing fine. I don't think there is any danger of you failing the course.
No, there isn't.
It appears to me that you're working quite hard. So far, you have done well on the quiz and on the book report. Your participation is good too, so I think it would be a real shame to see you withdraw after having done so much work.
Yeah, I know. To be honest, I'm not worried about passing the course. The problem is that I need high grades so I can get into law school or graduate school. I don't want to risk getting a low grade and there's too little time to study the entire textbook. What do you think I should do?
Well, are you familiar with HIT? It's our history tutoring program.
No, I'm not. I've heard about math tutors and ESL tutors, but I've never heard anything about tutors for history classes.
Let me tell you about it. It's not a well-known program because we just started it this semester. Graduate students can provide you with free tutoring 3 times a week. Some of the HIT tutors reported to me that they spend a lot of time summarizing the textbook and providing advice for exams and assignments.
Yes, but unfortunately, most of these university services are offered only in the daytime, and that's when I have to work. I usually work until the early evening.
Oh, no problem. The tutoring sessions usually don't start until after 8 p.m.
Wow! Can anyone use HIT?
Yes, it's available free of charge for all undergraduate students.
That's good. Where can I get more information?
Visit our homepage, click on the HIT icon, and you should be well on your way.
Okay, now I'm excited. I'm going to check this out as soon as I get back to my computer.
Let me know if you have more questions.
Thanks for your help.
My pleasure.
Now, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 6.
Listen to part of a lecture in a zoology class.
The next kind of bear I'd like to discuss with you today is the polar bear. As I already mentioned on Tuesday, polar bears only live in the Arctic, primarily in northern Canada, northern Russia, and Alaska. If, for example, you are in southern Canada, you won't see any of these bears. Now, you're probably aware that the Arctic is an extremely harsh environment and one of the coldest places on Earth. But let me remind you of what it's really like in the Arctic, especially in late December or early January. The temperature frequently drops below minus 40 degrees centigrade and sometimes gets even colder. Combine that with strong winds, little or no sunlight, and very little vegetation, and what you get is an environment in which very few species are capable of surviving. The polar bear, however, thrives in this kind of environment. The polar bear spends his time roaming throughout the Arctic, walking on land and ice, swimming in freezing seawater, and floating on sheets of ice while looking for seals, fish, and other food. Their favorite food is seals, which they find along the edges of the ice, in holes in the ice, and under cracks in the ice. They have no natural enemies in this environment, which is perfectly suited for them. Now, what you see behind me is a photo of a polar bear. As you can see, it's very beautiful. But what's not apparent in this and other similar photos is the bear's actual size. Polar bears are much bigger than the brown and black bears we discussed earlier. In fact, they're huge. They weigh up to 1,600 pounds, or 270 kilograms. And they're designed to survive in their environment. They have very thick white fur, which camouflages them from the snow and ice, and insulates them from the extreme cold. It's much thicker than the fur of bears that we discussed earlier. Polar bears are also strong swimmers. They have large front paws that amazingly allow them to swim a few hundred kilometers from land. Despite their impressiveness, polar bears, unlike black bears, are an endangered species. This is a result of global warming, which will be a topic of our next film. The Arctic is becoming too warm for the bears. That ice I just mentioned to you is now disappearing. It breaks up much earlier in the spring, and now it's a lot further from land. Ice thickness in the Arctic has decreased by 40% in the last 30 years, and some scientists predict that the Arctic basin might not have any ice in another 50 years. For polar bears, this is terrible. Ice is essential to their existence. Less ice means fewer seals and less food. Polar bears do their hunting in the winter, but because the winter is getting shorter and because the ice is disappearing earlier, they have less time to restore their fat. In the summer, they're forced to remain on land for longer periods of time, and during that time, they live off the fat stored in their bodies. 30 years ago, they spent just over 3 months on land. Now, it's almost 4 months. The shorter the winter and the earlier the ice breaks up, the less time they have to restore their fat. This reduces their strength and energy. With less ice, polar bears must swim further to reach it. This further reduces their strength and energy. These circumstances have steadily decreased the bear population over the last 30 years.
Now, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 9.
Listen to a lecture in a sociology class.
In today's discussion of group dynamics, we're going to focus on the very smallest group possible, a group of 2, formerly known as a dyad. Love affairs, marriages, and even really close friendships are dyads. And there are 2 characteristics that make these relationships very special, unique. In fact, they're unlike any other relationship. The first thing that sets off dyads from all other social relationships is that they are typically much more intense than the others. Yeah, there's no one to focus on other than the other member, so naturally the relationships can be very intense, deep, strong, and often very passionate. What does this lead to? Well, put simply, these relationships tend to be the most consequential relationships of our lives. The next thing that makes these relationships unique is that they are highly unstable. If both members don't actively work on maintaining the relationship, then the thing ceases to exist. I mean, think about it. What happens if a member of, say the photography club quits the club? What happens to the club? Well, probably not too much. The group survives. This is not the case in a dyad, right? If one person quits, the group is finished.
Now, you have some time to look at questions 10 to 12.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a university employee.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm looking for the National Journal of Environmental Science, but I just can't seem to find it.
Okay, well, have you looked on the shelves?
Yeah, I've looked up and down. I didn't see it at all.
Maybe it's checked out. Let me look it up. No, it's not in our system. We must not subscribe to that particular journal. Let's see. The National Journal of Environmental Science, right? No, we don't have it.
Really? I need an article from it to use in a research paper. Is there any other way to get it?
Have you tried the interlibrary loan system?
No, I've never heard of it. What is it?
It's a system that we have that allows us to borrow materials from other libraries.
Really? But how much does it cost?
We do it for free. I think most other libraries do too.
That's great. Okay, so how can I get this journal?
Well, we can either get it from a university library or a public library. It'll be faster from a university library, but there's usually more demand for things from university libraries. As for public libraries, you'll be more likely to find it in stock, but they can take up to a month to get it to us.
Yeah, that's not good. My paper's due in 3 weeks. How about the other university libraries?
Let me search through them. Okay, I see that actually one of our university libraries does have it, except it's on reserve for the next couple of days. So let's make a request right now. That way you can make sure that you're given first priority as soon as it's released from reserve.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I really don't want to miss the opportunity to get it.
Sure. Just fill out this form with your name and the name of the journal.
Now, you have some time to look at questions 13 to 15.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hey, John, how are you today?
I'm good. Actually, I need to ask you a question.
Sure, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm really concerned about my performance in class. I feel as though my grades haven't been as good as I'd like them to be, and, well, I was hoping to ask you what I can do to bring them up.
Sure. We still have the final exam, so doing well on that is your best bet. Well, let's see. Let me get the gradebook. Okay, so I see that you got a 78 on your midterm exam.
Yeah, even though I studied and studied for it.
I always suggest studying smarter rather than just studying more. Study only the large main points of the book and my lectures. Oh, and of course on top of that, make sure you're taking the suggestions I make in class about what to study.
Well, I thought I did that, and I was pretty sure that I took everything in. It didn't quite hit me until I received my test grade.
Well, come see me before the final exam so I can clear up the main points. I certainly don't expect you to remember everything I say, but I absolutely don't mind going over what to expect.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Sure. I'm usually available in the afternoons, so come see me anytime you're uncertain about something.
That is the end of section 1. Now turn to section 2.
Section 2. You will hear a seminar with Dr. Martin Merriweather of the Antarctic Centre in Christchurch, New Zealand.
Now you have some time to look at questions 16 to 25.
We're pleased to welcome Dr. Martin Merriweather of the Antarctic Centre in Christchurch, New Zealand, who has come along to talk to us today about the role of the centre and the Antarctic Treaty. Now, my first question is about the choice of location for the centre. Why Christchurch? Was it because of the climate?
Well, actually, New Zealand is the second closest country to Antarctica, and Christchurch is often used on Antarctic expeditions.
Right, so it's because of where we are, coupled with our historical role. So tell us, what is the main purpose of the centre?
Oh, well, we have two complementary roles. One is as a scientific base for expeditions and research, and the other is as an information centre.
Tell us something about the role as a scientific base.
Well, we're able to provide information about what scientists should take with them to the South Pole. For example, the centre contains a clothing warehouse where expeditions are supplied with suitable clothing for the extreme conditions.
I suppose you need a bit more than your normal winter coat.
Yes, exactly. And then there's also the specialist library and mapping services.
Right. And which countries are actually located at the centre?
Well, the centre houses research programs for New Zealand, for the United States, as well as for Italy. There's even a US post office at the American Air Force Base here.
Really? And what does the visitor centre offer?
Well, since very few people will ever experience the Antarctic firsthand, the Visitors Centre aims to recreate the atmosphere of Antarctica. There's a mock campsite where you can see inside an Antarctic tent and imagine yourself sleeping there. And the centre also acts as a showcase for the unique international cooperation which exists in Antarctica today.
What is it actually like at the South Pole? I know you've been there on a number of occasions.
Yes, I have, and each time I'm struck by the awesome beauty of the place. It's magnificent, but you can really only visit it in the summer months.
October to March?
Yes, because it's completely dark for 4 months of the year. And, in addition, it has to be the coldest place on Earth.
Colder than the North Pole? Why is that?
Well, unlike the North Pole, which is actually a frozen sea, Antarctica is a landmass shaped like a dome, with the result that the winds blow down the slopes at speeds of up to 150 kilometres an hour. And that's what makes it so cold.
Oh.
And one other interesting thing is that Antarctica is the driest continent on Earth, surprisingly. And so you have to drink large amounts of water when you're there.
How old is Antarctica?
Oh, we're pretty sure it was part of a larger landmass, but it broke away from the rest of the continent 170 million years ago.
How can you be certain of this?
Because fossils and rocks have been discovered in Antarctica, which are the same as those found in places such as Africa and Australia.
Amazing. To think that it was once attached to Africa. Now, let's just have a look at the Antarctic Treaty. How far back does the idea of an international treaty go?
Well, as far back as the 19th century, when 11 nations organised an international event.
When was that exactly?
In 1870, and it was called the Polar Research Meeting. And then, not long after that, they organised something called the First International Polar Year.
And that took place when exactly?
Over 2 years, from 1882 to 1883. But it wasn't until the 1950s that the idea of an international treaty was proposed. And in 1959, the treaty was actually signed.
What do you see as the main achievements of the treaty?
Well, firstly, it means that the continent is reserved for peaceful use.
That's Article 1, isn't it?
Yes.
That's important, since the territory belongs to everyone.
Yes, but not as important as Article 5, which prohibits any nuclear explosions or waste disposal.
Which is marvellous. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop there because I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thanks for coming along today and telling us all about the centre and its work.
That is the end of the listening test.